What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Detroit Red Wings. As the Red Wings season has gone, at the very least, what I expected for the Red Wings. Obviously, things have tailored off since the trade deadline. The series they had against the Ottawa Senators a couple weeks ago really kind of put in perspective the reality of the Detroit Red Wings right now, but we have a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. So, the Detroit Red Wings the other day, Steve Yzerman spoke in a press conference. He doesn't speak that often, but when he does speak, he gives a lot of information, and he did that the other day. So, to start off with kind of what he talked about, obviously the reporters were asking about, Tyler Bertuzzi and, Oscar Sundqvist, and what's the development of some of the younger guys and things like that. And I think we're going to start off with the trades, because I think that sent a real message to the locker room and the team of what kind of is going on here. So, for starters, the Tyler Bertuzzi trade, it sounded like from Steve Yzerman and even from at the tail end of Bert's time in Detroit, there never really seemed to be any sort of discussions of an extension. And I think that Steve Yzerman kind of said, listen, as much as we'd love to keep this guy, on our roster, if the value is there, it's something that you can't pass up on. And considering that maybe we're a team that can make the playoffs but can't win a championship yet, I think played a huge factor in Steve Yzerman ultimately deciding to take the patient route and continuing the process, continuing the rebuild of their ultimate goal, which is for number 71 on the Red Wings to lift Lord Stanley's Cup. And that is obviously speaking to Dylan Larkin, and we'll get to that in a second as well. So that was kind of the situation around Bertuzzi. It didn't really sound like, this is probably going to be his biggest pay-in, his biggest contract in his NHL career, in his entire life. So I think he's going to go try and get the bag this summer, and who can really blame him, right? I don't think anybody's really against that. That's kind of what we're looking at right now with Bertuzzi, and that's kind of why he got dealt. The other aspect is some of the guys like Sundqvist, who was a great line mate with David Perron. Obviously, there was a little bit of hurt feeling toward that. They had a lot of time together in St. Louis. Dylan Larkin obviously losing his buddy in Bertuzzi. That obviously hurt. And then you look at some of the prospects, which is kind of the next thing that he talked about. He talked about guys like Sebastian Cossa, maybe not necessarily a full-on setback in the Coastal League playing in Toledo, but, he's continuing to develop, and maybe it's just slower than they expected. And, for goaltending, that is a huge thing, is having the patience. So he's playing in the Coastal League, the East Coastal League in Toledo, and he's kind of grinding it out down there. So Sebastian Cossa, the next great goalie in Detroit, is still in the wings. It might just take a little longer than they first maybe projected or expected. And nobody cares when you get there, just that you get there and you win championships, right? And that's kind of what I think they're looking at with Cossa. A couple of other guys that he mentioned obviously Elmer Soderblom, who Red Wings fans really want to see. I do think we're going to see a little bit of him here down the stretch. We've seen a lot of Jonathan Berggren, and Yzerman even mentioned that he didn't really expect to see Berggren this much. And he's not ready to call him a regular in the lineup yet because it's Steve Yzerman. But he's basically becoming a regular on this team, considering the health of the team and the what's the best word to put this? The lack of attrition on this team, and the fact that they're kind of going really deep into the prospect pool now, and now we're seeing some of these younger guys getting called up. You're going to see more of them. In the limited time we've seen of him, same thing for Zadina and Joe Veleno. When they're healthy and in the lineup, they actually looked pretty good this year for most stretches, and Steve Yzerman gave a shout out to those guys. He didn't really mention too much on the situation around Lucas Raymond, but Lucas Raymond has really struggled this year, so hopefully he has a really big summer this year and, has some time off. Hopefully he gets better, because I think Red Wings fans, again, when he's a top 10 draft pick, Lucas Raymond, you expect a little bit more from him in Detroit. So I expect him to have a better season next year. Kind of the same thing with Cossa. We're still waiting to see what happens with Albert Johansson. Still waiting to see what happens with, what's his name? The defenseman, Simon Edvinsson. there's a lot of excitement around him. We're seeing the emergence of Jake Wallman and that pairing between Wallman and Moritz Seider. Really exciting to see those two guys. Wallman got his extension, and he was just a throw-in in that Oscar Sundqvist-Nick Leddy trade, and he's actually turned out to probably be the best player in that deal right now. That's how good he has been for the Red Wings alongside his line mate Moritz Seider. So very exciting there, and we saw how the Ben Sherratt pairing worked out earlier in the year. It didn't really work, so I think everyone's glad to see that Seider is kind of finding his game alongside Jake Wallman, and it was good enough to where he got an extension. And then the other thing, some other guys we might see if he's healthy at any point down the stretch here, Michael Rasmussen, however you want to call it. He's a really good player. I think they'd like to see him a little bit more. Alex Nedeljkovic, still a lot of questions around him and what his future is in Detroit. He's kind of a buried salary right now, so I don't necessarily know how things are going to go with that, but I guess that's kind of part of the process. You still have a couple of other younger defensemen, Emil Viro, Donovan Sabrango, and Seth Barton, all playing in GR with the Grand Rapid Griffins. So hopefully we see a little bit more of them. Same thing with Jared McIsaac. Cross Hannes was a really good player in Grand Rapids this year, but he got injured. So hopefully we see him maybe get a chance at the starting lineup next year with the Detroit Red Wings making the 12-man roster up front. Maybe, maybe not. I think a lot of that depends on who they get in free agency, who comes in the draft. There's a lot of questions around that. But if it's to a point where maybe we see them drafting in the top 5, Detroit, maybe they end up not having much room there for a guy like Cross Honest. But again, a really good player. I know the Red Wings fans want to see more of Soderblom. We're definitely going to see more of him. Marco Kasper, we got a little update on Marco Kasper. Steve Yzerman really hasn't evaluated whether they will be bringing Marco to North America in the fall, or they're going to keep him in Europe, in Sweden. There's still a little bit of questions about that. That will probably be answered closer to the summer, so I don't think they're really certain yet with Kasper. But I think they're seeing him as a good middle six center at some point. Maybe not a first line or a second line, but legitimately, I think the safer bet, they want him to be a third line center, and hopefully if he's better than that, great. But I think that's kind of what you're looking at for a guy like Marco Kasper. So, looking at this team, like I said, there's a lot of things to really like about the Red Wings. Yeah, is it disappointing that they sold at the deadline? They didn't go for it, of course. But I think you're also seeing the lack of production from some of the guys that they did bring in. Ben Sherratt maybe hasn't been as great of a fit as they were hoping for. He signed till 2026. That one might hurt. Andrew Kopp, kind of the same thing. I know a lot of Red Wings fans aren't a huge fan of him recently. Andrew Kopp just not really physical enough, and you wonder if there's going to be some problems there. You kind of wonder what's the status with a guy like Pia Suter. Is he going to stick around long-term in Detroit? He's up for a new contract this summer. Same thing for Adam Ernie. Is he going to stick around? So there's a lot of questions with some of these younger guys, but for the most part, there's a lot to like about the Red Wings. And considering how close they got in year 3 of the Yzerplan, looking at next year, things look pretty bright for the Red Wings. And like I said, there's still going to be holes on this roster, depending on what happens with Albert and Simon on the back end going into the fall. Are they ready for the NHL? There might be a couple holes if they're not in the lineup. Do we see Lucas Raymond have a bounce-back season next year? Do we see the emergence of Jonathan Berggren into a full-time NHL regular? These are the questions that we're going to start to get answered going into the summer. And that's really what you're looking at here for the rest of this season for the Red Wings, the next 20 games, is just seeing how much fight this team has left. And, you hate to say this because that usually means your team isn't very good, but, the Red Wings are going to be kind of playing for pride the rest of this year. Can they improve from where they've been the past 2 years? Because obviously being at the bottom of the NHL standings hasn't helped them win the draft lottery. So at this point, you've gotten some pretty good players and, finding a way to get first-round picks where you can, right? They got them for Hronek and Bertuzzi here over the last couple of weeks. But I think for the most part, I think the most exciting thing is Larkin is here for the next 8 years after this season. And you're kind of seeing this team kind of round into form. It's just waiting for the pieces to grow. And there is that little sense of the growing pains in Detroit, right? And that's obviously a little frustrating. The patience level for the fans. They demand a good hockey team, a proud franchise, an original six franchise up there in Detroit. They demand a team that can compete any given night. And for the most part, they've done that a lot better this season than the past 2 years. But again, they kind of came up short this year as well. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you guys think it was a lost season for the Red Wings? Do you think it was a good season for the Red Wings? Let me know your guys' thoughts. Let me know what you guys think going into the summer. Who do you guys want to see the Red Wings draft, right? Maybe other than Connor Bedard, right? Do you want to see Matvei Michev, Adam Fantilli? Let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys again next time.